Hello and welcome back to Kairos. I am here today with Leonie Scriven to talk about foster caring. Leonie, great to have you here.
Thank you, it's good to be here.
Leonie has been a foster carer for a number of years. I met Leonie many years ago when we were in the same congregation, and we were just reminiscing about some stories from those days. And so I thought it'd be a good opportunity to reconnect with Leonie and have a conversation about what it's been like for her to be a foster carer. So Leonie, perhaps you can begin by just telling us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
I am Leonie and I am a foster carer. I grew up in the mid-north in the early 50s, lived in a little town called Golnair, started my education in Golnair, moved to Puri as a teenager, completed my education, started my nursing degree, met my husband-to-be, came down to Adelaide, married, had children, worked, and then reached a point in life where foster care was the start of our next journey.
And you're a Christian. Did you grow up in the church?
I grew up in the church. We were taken to church as children. That was your Sunday drive. We went to Port Pirie for the church. We didn't have a Christian upbringing in the home as such. It was just you went to church on Sundays. But as a child, I was sent to stay with people often. And one of the places I stayed was with my godparents, who were practicing Lutherans, and we would have devotions and Christian stories there. Very strict upbringing. But I had an affinity with the pastor that we had in Port Pirie at the time, who has since passed on. I, at one point, wanted to be a nun and a deaconess. There was a connection with the church, and I can't say for what reason. It was just one of those things that I grew up feeling an affinity with. But I went to church and that was it. There was no overwhelming, this is who I am. My faith grew and developed with the people I came in touch with, and one of those people was Ern Heine, the pastor I had, and then with Ron, my husband, and then going to church with the children and teaching Sunday school and Vacation Bible School. And then probably the pastor we were just talking about is the pastor that made me really stop and think. And really, I don't think I can honestly say that my faith became a recognisable faith until my Dooneycourt days, when Keith was there.
Yeah, big shout out to Keith McNichol.
Yes.
He's the pastor we're talking about.
Yes.
For those of you familiar with our circles here in the Lutheran Church of Australia, that's wonderful.
Yeah, so it's a late and a long, slow road to faith, and people just assume that you've been a Christian all your life, and I guess on the boundaries I have, but recognising your own faith comes differently at different times for people, and mine came later in life. And to be quite honest, when Ron died was when I hit the wall, and I realised just how much I needed my faith and how much faith I did have. So it's been there, but I guess you take it for granted until something in your life happens and you really realise just how important it is.
And that's perhaps a good transition point into the foster caring discussion, because I know that it was all around this same time in your life that this journey started as well, if I'm right. So perhaps you can tell us about how did you first get into foster caring?
When I was a child, I was cared for a lot by other people. One family in particular was the parents of a school friend took me in when my mother was ill, and they treated me like their own child. I didn't feel like I was a nuisance. I didn't feel like a visitor. I had jobs to do. I had rewards when I did well at school. I had praise. I had hugs and cuddles, and I felt like I was part of the family, and that was just... it was mind-blowing. It really was. I wasn't a nuisance. I felt loved. And that sowed a seed. It must have just stuck in my head. When we moved from the farm into Pirie, my parents were cottage parents, and so they were the parents in a government home that had 4 or 5 older foster children in them. So I then understood what foster care was about.
From quite an early age.
From a fairly early age. And then when I started nursing, I was aware of children in the neonatal unit that were being cared for, waiting for foster carers. And then one day I was working and there was an older couple came by. I assumed they were grandparents to a child, struck up a conversation and found out they were foster carers. And instead of working, I talked to them. And I thought, well, they were in their late 60s, early 70s, and they were still fostering. And I thought, well, it's not too late. So I went home and talked to Ron, who immediately said, what do you want to do that for?
So how old were you at this stage,
I was,
if I'm allowed to ask?
I was 55 and Ron was nearly 66. And he just thought, what? But after a bit of badgering and nagging, etc., he said...
Encouraging, yeah.
Yes, strong encouragement. He came along to classes with me and we did the training and he said, we'll see how we go for 6 months. It took him less than 3 months and he was gone. He was smitten. And I haven't looked back. He didn't look back. For the next 4 years, we had 16 children, often 2 and 3, and on one occasion 4 at a time. And the day he died, I went out to his work to see him, and in his office, all around the top of around his desk, were photos of all 16 children and our grandson. So he really took to it, yeah.
So perhaps you can tell us then a little bit more about that process in becoming a foster carer, because I know that probably in modern society that could be one thing that is quite overwhelming for people, thinking about the steps that you must go through to get to that point.
It is. It's a bit scary and you don't expect to have your privacy invaded quite so much. There's some basic things, like you need a police clearance, and it's a very intense police clearance. It just doesn't clear you, it clears your immediate family and extended family as well. So the people that are going to be involved with whatever child you have, they need to be cleared of anything too sinister, I guess. No, driving offence is okay, but anything against children is just definitely not. So you have that clearance, and if you get through that, then you can start the training, which is fairly intense, more so now, I think, than when Ron and I started, because we were the only carers being processed at the time. So all of our training was done in our lounge room. So it was quite relaxed and it really wasn't quite onerous. But it's about safe care of infants. It's about mandatory reporting and recognising trauma, knowing how to manage trauma. Then we had a family tree, a genogram done, which was quite extensive. Then Ron and I were interviewed together and separately, which was a test. It really checked our communication skills, our honesty skills. Our finances were looked into, our relationship was looked into, our sex lives were looked into. There were no secrets. Sort of we came out of that process, just looked at each other and thought, wow. So for us it took 6 months for the training. These days it takes about 9 months, and when I'm talking to potential carers, I say if you look at it like a pregnancy, it takes 9 months to have a baby, and it's pretty similar.
So is that all the government doing that, or is that outsourced to other entities who do that sort of training?
Different organisations. Lose and Community Care do all their own training, and once they've done their training, they write up an assessment and present that to a government department, who then has to process all that information and either approve us or not, as the case may be. Fortunately, we were approved in October 10 years ago, whenever that was, 2009. And we had one offer of a baby pretty much straight away, and I thought about it. I talked to Ron about it, we prayed about it, and we said no. Only because at that time we were raising our grandson, and this particular child was a terminal child. And because Ron was a little bit apprehensive, I just thought, this is not a good start to a foster care journey. So I did decline that and was racked with guilt for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it was December before we got our first baby. Had a phone call when the mother went into labour. Baby was to be removed immediately. And that was it.
So, as much as you're able, can you tell us about, in that sort of situation, what are the circumstances for these families like? So, in that case, the mother or the people caring for her knew ahead of time that this was going to be a foster child for reasons of the mother's health or the family circumstances, or
I think the overriding umbrella for children coming into care is mental illness. The parents have a degree of mental health issue. With our first baby, who to this day, she'll be 10 this year, calls herself Omar's number one baby. Her parents had some significant drug issues and serious mental health issues. So it was quite a dangerous situation, her removal from the hospital. And it was dangerous for the time we had her because, we had police protection and the social workers changed several times. But that's the only really scary situation we've ever had. And we kept her for 4 months, and she's now with her forever family. And that entire family is my family. The foster mother of that number one girl calls me her mother. It's just beautiful. There's one of the pluses of foster care.
Yeah.
Your family grows.
So are there different? So when you talk about a forever family, are there different? What's the categories of foster care, or how does that work?
When Ron and I started, we were emergency or short-term carers.
Yeah.
Which really is one and the same because there's no such thing as emergency, it just goes on and on. But officially, emergency care is the first 3 months of care, while a child, from the time a child's been removed until the court can make a decision about whether the child will go into long-term care or to kin, a relative of the parents or back to the parents.
Yeah.
A long-term care is like baby number one who was awarded a gourmet teen, and she's now a long-term child, like a forever child, where the foster family are their parents for life.
Yeah. And so this can be, I imagine, fairly short notice when you're doing those emergency short term, like you've got plans for the weekend and then a call Friday night.
You don't go anywhere without your mobile phone.
Right.
I've had babies turn up at 1:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. Not quite so much now because I've backed off a little bit and just take the newborns rather than the older ones. I used to take up to 6 months, but they'd still bring a 4-year-old just because it was 4 in the morning and there was nowhere else. So I don't do the bigger kids now, I just do the babies. So yes, any time of the day or night, any day of the week. So life's exciting.
So Leonie, one thing that I know some people sometimes wonder about with foster caring is that how caring for these children interrelates with caring for your own children, if you have children, or perhaps in other people's case, grandchildren around and that sort of thing. So I wonder if you can comment on that dynamic.
Well, I have 3 children, but they're adults and they'd all left home before we started fostering. So other than them giving their approval, as though we needed it, they were not involved. But my grandson was raised by us for the first 5-6 years of his life and is still a big part of my life and I of his. Tyson comes to church with me each week, so even though he doesn't live with me, he comes here of a Sunday morning or Saturday night and we go to church together. Now, Tyson has been a part of every child, all 62 children. He's been a part of their life. And as I alluded to earlier, if he's not called on to do something during the service, Tyson is the one that will carry the child to the rail for a blessing. That's something he's extremely proud of. And it has given him an understanding of what goes on out there. And he's part of the reason we decided to foster, because he was an only child and we didn't want him to be spoilt or precocious. We wanted him to be aware of what's going on. And he's learnt so much about the other side, if you like. In fact, part of a school project was to write what makes me special. And he came home and he said, "Oh, Omar, I can ride a bike." And I said, "So can other kids." And he said, "Oh, I can ride a skateboard." And I said, "So can other kids. And they can play on computers too." I said, "But I bet you no other kid in your class looks after foster children." And so he wrote this paper on foster children. And it was beautifully written. He presented it at school twice, once to the class and then once to the teachers. So, that showed that he understood what goes on. He wrote about why we looked after them and how long we looked after them and his involvement. And he wrote about how he felt when they left and how he felt when a new one came. But at the end of the day, it did make him feel special, and that was part of his school assignment because, he goes to a Christian school, and Tyson is a boy that often doesn't feel special. So he might have got a good mark for his assignment, but he got a higher mark for his self-esteem because he was made to feel special because of his involvement.
So it's been an enriching experience
Totally,
for him.
totally, yeah. It's been wonderful.
And so, what are the biggest joys for you in being a foster carer, Leonie?
Well, one of them was a classic this morning. A carer came for a visit and brought her little girl, who was my baby, for a visit so I could see how she'd grown. Now, I had this baby from birth, well, she was 2 days old until she was 11 weeks old. And then she went to this carer who's now keeping her because she's a GOM 18. And just to see the growth and the development and the happiness, and mum's happy, baby's happy, and I feel terrific. I mean, it brings tears to your eyes, just the fact that the baby is happy, is doing well, no more trauma. Visits to the biological parents are being cut back because that is the trauma for the child. That is the biggest joy, to see them grow and develop. I have a couple of children, I have so many. Out of all the children I've had, there's probably about 15 that I'm regularly in touch with, that I'm just an OMA, I'm an honorary OMA. One little girl came to me at about, I think she was about 16, 18 months when she came. Came to me about 1:30 in the morning. It was in a really hot February. We'd had a run of 40+ degree days. She was brought to me with burns on the soles of her feet from being dragged around the streets with nothing on but a nappy. She had head lice, she had cigarette burns to her legs. She was just a mess and dead to look at. She had no soul, no life in it. She came in and I cuddled her and she fought. She didn't like that, so I didn't dare bath her or do anything, so I popped her in a cot. She immediately curled up into a ball, absolutely terrified. And when I reached my hand in to touch her, she just disappeared. It was almost like she was pretending she wasn't there or she was dead. So I stood at the cot and cried, as you do. And I sat there that night and just put my finger through the rail so that she could feel my finger and it wasn't going to hurt her. And it took me 24, 48 hours maybe before she would come to me willingly. And then, of course, we had the process of bathing her and trying to de-lice her and just make her feel safe. But skip all of that week to get to the point where she would smile and have a bit of life in her eyes. She's the baby I call my Amen baby. When I would give her food, I would sit and hold her hands so that she could say grace. And I'd hold her hands so that she didn't eat until we said grace. And within a couple of days, I didn't have to hold her hands. She would, if I sat down with her, she'd immediately go like this and we'd say grace. I'd put her to bed at night and she would know that I'd prepared the bottle in the corner. She'd run down to the bedroom door and wait for me, go into her cot and stand there for me to pick her up and put her in the cot. And she'd go like this and look up at me until I sang the nighttime prayer song. I'd give her a bottle, she'd scull it, throw it overboard, and she'd say, Amen. It was just precious. And in church, there would be a 7-second delay after prayers. She'd all of a sudden realise that everybody had said Amen, and she'd pipe up with an Amen. That it still brings a smile to my face. It's the fact that a child so young and so innocent can learn. It's just beautiful.
And that reminds me of just you mentioning taking them to church as well. It's one of the things I remember when we worshipped at Durnan Court, and actually we were just talking about a young couple in my current congregation who also you've got to know, who have had their first foster child, and just how it also has this effect on the community, and no doubt you've noticed this in your own family and friends and community as well.
Absolutely.
But it seems to draw people in and just do something. These little people.
They are a magnet for the village. That a village raises a child, and these children are the magnet, draws them in. I go to church every Sunday and I walk in and just these people pull around the pram to see who I've got. Whether I've had that child for 4 weeks or for the first time, they want to know the story behind the baby. Babies always come up for a blessing. I don't often carry them out to the front. My grandson, that's what he does, carries them out to the front. So they have a blessing every week, which is important to me. And I just believe that's one little thing that we can give them before they leave me. But the gifts that I get from members of the congregation, there's one member without fail will bring a box of nappies or a packet of nappy wipes to church for me to take home.
Wow.
So I haven't bought nappies for a couple of years. So you don't get much from the government other than the child in a nappy, but the blessings that you get from so many other people are overwhelming. My doctor's surgery supply me each month with $50 odd worth of supplies, whether it be nappy wipes or new couple of items of clothing or whatever I might need. I am a lucky woman.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so we've been talking a bit about these positives and these moments of joy in the journey. What are the more challenging parts of being a foster carer?
Dealing with the government, I think, is the most challenging. It is difficult because you are the advocate for this child, and I know officially the social worker is the advocate, but in actual fact, the social workers are so busy, the system is so bad that these children are a statistic. So as a carer, we are the only voice the babies have. And if we don't make a stand and make a fuss and stamp our feet, then sometimes the kids just get lost. So that is the most challenging. And even with this little button, I fight.
There's a baby right here at the moment, by the way,
yes,
sleeping.
She goes to access and she'll come back and she's absolutely shut down. And so I report that back to the social worker because that shut down behaviour is a sign of trauma. Some babies will shut down. Other babies will come back from access and they'll scream for 12 hours. Or you'll take them from the driver and cuddle them. The baby will turn in and almost suck the smell out of you to make sure that they're back in their safe space. So we have to speak for them. And the more difficult challenge, I think, and the heartbreaking challenge is saying goodbye. I know when my children are leaving. I know I'm not going to keep them. But you pour your heart and soul into every baby that crosses your front door. And from the minute I know when they're leaving, I start the grieving process. And there's not one child out of 62 that I haven't shed tears over. It's heartbreaking. I have, just over there, palm crosses. And Ron started writing each child's name on the cross. And when he died, my girlfriend's husband has taken on that role. So I've got 2 palm crosses now. One's completed front and back, and the other one I've just started the second side. So every name of a child that's been here. So that when I do my devotions, I've got my palm crosses, because I can't remember their names.
Yeah.
I've got all their names.
So how many have you had? Do you know? How many?
62.
62 children.
Yeah.
Wow. And just so Leonie, as you think over the many children that you've cared for, are there any particular examples that come to mind that you could share with us, just to get one concrete particular situation?
Well, I can talk about a baby who's now nearly 2, spent the first 6 months of her life with me, and I see every week. It's a little Chinese girl, came to me at birth, very sad circumstances, and through no fault of her mother, who doesn't speak English. But baby Alice came to me for care and for safekeeping. It was quite a nasty situation. Alice came to church with me every week, as my babies do. And at a certain point, I was able to arrange for Mum to have access with Alice at church. So Mum and her other family would come to church and sit in the narthex during the service, and I asked through a translator if I could still come and get Alice and take her for a blessing, which they were gracious enough to allow me to do. And that happened for, the remaining time that Alice stayed with me. Now, Alice is now 2, left me at 6 months. Alice and her mum come to church every Sunday. And Mum wants to be washed. I just cried the day Chen Wei came to me and she said that she wants to be washed. She goes to a Know Your Bible group and she's studying the Bible, does not want to go to a Mandarin-speaking church. She wants to come to Omar's church because I'm family. So she wants to be baptised and have Alice baptised now. That'll be a day I cry. That's special.
Right.
So
that is really special.
It is really, really special. And it was unexpected. I really thought that once Alice went, I wouldn't see them again. But without fail, she'll come to church and occasionally bring me some Chinese food and sits with me every Sunday. It is just beautiful. The other Sunday, Tyson was godfather to one of our children, one of the babies at church. And Alice and her mum were up at the back at the church and we were at the front. But as they walked down the aisle toward the communion rail during the communion, I could hear Alice halfway down the aisle saying, "Omar, Omar, Omar." That fills me with more joy than you can ever imagine. So that's
a great example.
An example that will make up for all of those children that I've lost, that have gone outside of the LCC system and I'll never see or hear from.
But like you say, I mean, you don't know what's going to happen from this little bit of time you have. You couldn't have predicted this, and who knows what God will do with these children in the future. And,
it's true. You really, I mean, you pray for them every day, sometimes all day, depending on the circumstances. But for this particular child, who I didn't think would come, only children don't stay with me. But this is still my opportunity to be Umar to this family, and it's really special.
Because of some of these things you describe, these very unique emotional journeys that you're going through, there must be an incredible need for support among foster carers. I imagine that you sort of have a certain empathy for each other that it would be...
Well, as I sort of suggested earlier, there is a network, a family amongst the carers. My family has grown incredibly since Ron died in particular, because I don't have him to draw on anymore. And I guess there's a lot of single carers, and single carers in particular draw on all sorts of help. So we tend to create little networks, little pockets of network, just to vent, because a lot of the information we have about these kids, there's so much privacy you're not allowed to talk about. But with each other, you can almost let your hair down, because we're all going through the same thing. We all have babies that have come to us as a result of drugs, alcohol, domestic violence, sexual abuse, mental health, homelessness, neglect. And that all of those issues start in utero. They start at conception. So for somebody to say, oh, you've got a baby because they're not traumatised, they just don't know. These babies are born traumatised, and the joy, the aim of having a newborn is to help rewire their brains, because those first 2 years of life are when you can rewire them, and you can teach them to love and attach and know what affection is. So foster carers are unique, I guess, in that we all travel the same road, and we all understand each other's pain at different times.
Yeah.
But you also need outside people that don't foster, just so that you can be normal.
Yes, yeah. And as a Christian, Leonie, we talked about a bit about your faith journey early on. How has that interacted with being a foster carer? How has your faith been shaped by these experiences?
Incredibly. I think, in fact, I know my faith has grown so much in the last 10 years, and more so in the last 6 since Ron died, because I've needed it. You do tend to take it for granted, I think. It's just there. but you don't call on it, you don't pull on it until you hit rock bottom, and then you appreciate it once you've hit rock bottom, which was the case when Ron died. But since then, I think I've grown so much more. I'm certainly more confident in my faith. I'm not embarrassed to talk about my faith, which was, I think, was the point. Not that I wanted to be embarrassed, but a lot of my friends aren't Christians, and whether it be for their comfort or mine, I'm not sure. We didn't actually say the G word because it might be uncomfortable. But I'm quite comfortable. In fact, I tell them that, you know, if it wasn't for God, I don't know where I would be right now. And that, I don't mean to be exaggerating or anything, but when Ron died, that was a key point. And the children, I had 2 with me when he died, they were the reason I got up in the morning, because I couldn't see past the fact that somebody needed me. And then bit by bit, the church family was always there for me. We were without a pastor at the time, which made it a little bit difficult. But since then, you know, sort of I'm here and Faith's here and around, and that's my life now. And the children, they come to church with me. They go up for a blessing every week. I sing them. In fact, the only songs I know are the songs I sing them at bath time and night time, which are, you know, what a friend we have in Jesus, and Jesus loves me, and all those sorts of things. And if they're unsettled, I only have to sing those and it's instant calm. So babies in this home grow up knowing that God is life. The DVD that I play for them, especially the withdrawal babies, is a Kids Praise DVD. And the music is soothing, and it's a bit like an earworm. It's in your head and you're humming it for the whole day. So your faith is integral. It is who I am.
And let's say there's a person or a couple out there who has considered becoming a foster carer at some point. Would you have any words of advice or encouragement? Or
please do it. Please. There is no life like it. I love it. I thought I would retire at 65. I really did. I thought I'm just going to gradually drift off into the sunset. But it's like an addiction. I can't retire. I've changed how I foster. I now take them for their 3-month order, and then I'll take a little bit of a break. I'll go on a holiday, or I'll just take a break, and then I'll put my hand up and say, okay, I'm ready. And there's another baby ready for me. I cannot imagine the day coming that I stop. The joy out of having these children is immeasurable. To watch a baby that comes to you like this the whole time because they're withdrawing or screaming in pain because of drugs, to watch them smile, or to watch them be nursed and not tremble, to cuddle them and see their face relax and see a smile, you know, that you can't put a price on that. There is no money in it if you want to foster. Trust me, you're not going to make any money. But you can't put a price on what you get from looking in a baby's face. Even this one who's just gone 5 weeks, she's starting to smile and coo. Now, how do you price that? How do you measure? You can't. It's you can't write about it. It's just something that is immeasurable, but you just can't give it up. It's like a drug on its own.
Well, Leonie, thank you very much for speaking about a bit about your journey with foster caring today. And when we were corresponding about this before we met, one of the documents that you sent me, which you had written, the title on the top of it was a quote from Jesus: "Let the little children come to me," and that's sort of been ringing in my ears as we've been talking today. And it seems like a good banner to have over everything we've been talking about.
Yeah, well, it's important, and they deserve it. Why should they be denied that opportunity. If only I could have them baptised.
Right.
We're not allowed to do that,
Right,
but they can
right.
go up for a blessing.
Right, right. Well, thank you again, Leonie, and
Thanks,
God
Josh.
bless you.
Thank you very much.